Death's Game begins by introducing us to the protagonist Cho Ye-jae, a happy college student full of dreams supported by his girlfriend Young Ji-soo, as he heads to a job interview that would change his life at the powerful Taekang company, only to suddenly witness the death of a man in the middle of the street. He didn't know it yet, but this fatality would change his life forever. After what he saw, he was so disoriented that he couldn't focus to get the job, resulting in 7 long years living in misery, having to sustain himself through odd jobs as he couldn't land a good job. Besides, he was burdened with a massive debt acquired from university. To make matters worse, he lost all his money accumulated over the years in an unsuccessful investment. Feeling like a complete failure, he ends his relationship with his beloved Jisoo because he doesn't want to ruin her life with his failure. Upon arriving home, he finds his belongings outside and a padlock on the door, as he has just been evicted due to the lack of rent payment. And finally, at dawn, he receives the message on his phone that he has been rejected in yet another job interview. All he wished for was to have had a normal life, a good job, to marry Jisoo and have children. However, consumed by the pain and anguish of his defeats and failures, he makes the drastic and desperate decision to end that suffering. After all, death is nothing compared to the hell he lives every day. Upon waking up, he finds himself in another body, as he is now someone else, and by his side is death herself in the form of a beautiful woman. She diverts him from the direct path to hell and takes him to the Valley of the Suicides, revealing what his punishment will be for mocking death. He will die 12 more times in 12 different bodies to learn to fear death and experience how painful it can be. But if he manages to avoid any of these deaths, he could continue living in the reincarnated body. The first body he inhabits is none other than the second heir of the Taekang company, the one that would have been the job of his dreams. He is the younger brother of Park Tae-woo. The two brothers have always been in competition to prove themselves better than the other. Living in the body of someone who has a luxurious life to the point of being in a private jet doesn't seem too bad. However, Ye-jae didn't have much time to enjoy his new life. The turbine explodes, the plane rips apart, and our protagonist experiences his first defeat in the game of death. And this nightmare will happen 11 more times because everything has just begun. Each round he dies, Ye-jae is greeted by death in this dark limbo, which is literally the Hall of Darkness, as the door in front of him leads to hell. Death takes him there to get a taste of what real suffering is like. No matter how much he tries to plead for mercy, his fate is already sealed, and he realizes that the hell he believed he was going through in life doesn't even compare to the true hell. Now, his new determination is to survive, but death doesn't seem willing to make things easy. After all, how do you survive a free fall without a parachute? Ye-jae now wakes up in the body of a professional world record-holding extreme sports athlete, attempting his new record of landing in a net on the ground. He fails miserably, with his death broadcasted worldwide, leaving everyone in shock. His third reincarnation is in the body of a high school student who was determined to follow the same path as Ye-jae because he couldn't bear the daily bullying at school. He is happy because now, to survive, all he has to do is not follow the boy's plan to jump off the roof. However, he soon realizes how difficult it is to avoid death when you're a weak kid against a group of aggressive bullies. But he follows basic logic. If you can't beat them, join them. Nothing better than teaming up with a stronger student who is also threatened and instigating him to rebel. His risky plan works, and he manages to turn the tables in his favor, turning the intimidator into the intimidated. The problem is that, after being humiliated, becoming the school joke, and losing the respect and the girl he liked, the former bully seeks revenge. And that's how Ye-jae loses another life. At this point, Ye-jae questions if survival is even possible because so far, he hasn't come close. But death doesn't give him concrete answers, let alone hope. On the contrary, it promises that things will only get worse from there. Upon awakening in his fourth body, he finds himself on the verge of being cruelly tortured. We are shown that this man is an assassin who worked for a secret organization that solves all kinds of problems, and he is in this situation after stealing 2 things from his boss: a large sum of money, and the girlfriend who suffered frequent abuse and aggression. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that, in addition to memories, Ye-jae also inherits the abilities of the possessed body. And the abilities of this body are incredible. Even with the most skilled assassins and the police in intense pursuit through the city, he manages to survive. Only to be betrayed in the end by the girl he fought so hard to save, as she manipulated him to ultimately get away with the stolen money. Seeing death enjoying his failures, Ye-jae decides to change his tactics. Instead of focusing on each body individually, He acts as if they are interconnected pieces. He decides to use his next reincarnation to recover the money from the criminal who just died, as he is certain the girl couldn't find it. However, death doesn't make it easy, putting him in the body of a prisoner in the next life. However, all is not lost, as this body belongs to a talented MMA fighter. He was imprisoned for accepting money to take the blame for a hit and run instead of a wealthy man. When the victim died during the trial, the sentence that should have been lenient increased, and the fighter was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with only 4 days left until his release. The original body owner thought it was a good idea to threaten the lawyer of the real culprit for more money, but it's Yi-jae who faces the consequences of this decision. Fortunately, he manages to use his fighting abilities to defend himself from the surprise attack of other inmates who want his head in exchange for the reward offered by the real culprit. Moreover, the stories start to intertwine in this incarnation because he ends up in the same cell as the bully from Life 3, who was imprisoned after the murder. Currently, the boy acts as a disturbed psychopath to scare off other inmates, but Yi-jae can't hold back his instinct for revenge and justice, wanting to take matters into his own hands. He tells everyone how weak and cowardly the former bully is, subjecting him to long days of intimidation in prison. Before leaving, he makes him believe that the spirit of the boy he killed in school is haunting him. Once released, he goes after the money he hid in the past life, and as a precaution, splits it in two, storing half in the subway station locker. Everything seemed to be going well until the father of the hit-and-run victim seeks revenge for his daughter. Despite Yi-jae surviving the initial attack, moments later, he is betrayed again. This time by the prison mate who ends him to claim the reward. Even with all the knowledge and skills acquired, Yi-jae doesn't seem to realize that his selfishness and greed are blinding him, causing him to overlook details that could help him win this game of death. Back in the Hall of Hell, he urges Death to send him to the next life quickly, because the money in the station locker could end up being lost. However, upon opening his eyes, he finds himself trapped in the body of a baby who clearly cannot grab a briefcase of money and can only cry without being understood. To make matters worse, the baby's parents are extremely abusive, and although Child Protective Services sees warning signs in the fragile little body, they do nothing about it. Totally defenseless, Yi-jae experiences death that same night. This was Death's cold move to show how arrogant he was to take his own life when others didn't even have the chance to choose to live. Now, in his seventh body, it seems to be his best bet for survival and the hope of rebuilding his life. Not only does he manage to retrieve the money bag in time, but he is also a model who has always had an easy life simply for being handsome. While working at a cafe, he reunites with his true love, ex-girlfriend Jisoo. He discovers that she has become an acclaimed author, and while reading her novel inspired by their love, he realizes all the moments he misunderstood her because of his own inferiority complex. Even though she always supported him in everything, he approaches her pretending to be a fan seeking advice on writing. Thus, they start meeting every day. Yi-jae tells her all the details of his deaths as if they were characters in fiction, fascinating her with his creativity. He strives to get closer to her, even though she is not yet ready to move on. But it's only when he sees the girl mourning his death that Yi-jae realizes the impact his actions had on his loved ones, not only on his girlfriend, but especially on his mother, who is now alone. Seeing her in so much pain makes him understand that giving up his own life was a huge mistake. He finally realizes that Death was right when accusing him of selfishness for hurting others with his decision. The more time he spends with Jisoo, the more feelings and memories of the moments he lived with her come back like a painful blow to remind him of what he abandoned. Realizing that he could die at any moment, he leaves all the money he obtained for his mother, and at night, he decides to reveal the whole truth to Jisoo. He says that the stories he told her about death are real, and the protagonist of that story was himself, Yi-jae. He apologizes for making her go through so much suffering, and reveals that she remains his only true love. It took him 7 more lives to finally understand that he had more than enough reasons to live. But just as he learns the lesson, Death appears ruthlessly to remind him that everything can end suddenly. The two are abruptly hit by a red car, killing Jisoo instantly. While agonizing on the ground, Yi-jae sees who the driver was, the heir of the Taikang company, Park Tae-woo. He then remembers that this same man was the older brother of his first body, the sponsor of the second body, the client of the fourth body, the real culprit for the hit and run, causing the imprisonment and death of the fifth body, and now the murderer of his beloved. Furthermore, the villain still takes the life of his seventh body to avoid problems. Back in the Dark Hall of Hell, Yi-jae feels a double torture now for this specific death. Because besides losing another chance to survive, he lost Jisoo forever. He vows revenge against Park Tae-woo. However, before that, he is fed up with this sick game, grabbing the deadly weapon and aiming it at death herself.